Israeli troops have shot dead one and wounded another Palestinian in the West Bank. Also, in various overnight raids, 13 Palestinians were arrested by Israeli forces. Now, this is news that comes in as nothing alarming. The atrocities against Palestinians have been going on for very long. Meanwhile, protests by Palestinians across the fence, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's in the West Bank, also is on the rise. What is going to happen there? How will we resolve the conflict? And what is the international community doing about it? Let me welcome our guests here who will be talking to us a little more and sharing their expertise. I'd like to welcome Mr. Ran Bar-Yoshafat. He is joining us from Jerusalem. He's a deputy director of the Kohelet Policy Forum. And also on the other side, we will be joined by Ms. Norma Hashim. She's the treasurer of Viva Palestina Malaysia, and she is joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you so much for being here on Newswire. The developments that have taken place, let me start with you, Ms. Norma Hashim. Of course, nothing new here. It is very sad that every day or the other we hear about deaths of Palestinians on the hands of IDF. How far is this going to go before any kind of resolution comes from the international community or from Israel? What is your take on the conflict there?
Well, in terms of detention and arrests, obviously, how about 800,000 Palestinians have already been arrested since 1967. I believe imprisonment and detention is a way for the Israelis to make sure to suppress the resistance against the occupation. So this is one way they will keep doing again and again. Israel also has total control over the internet over there, so they have surveillance on the Palestinians. And this is the way they keep tabs on everyone. And imprisonment, because I covered Palestinian prisoners in my 2 books, which I've done, and children are arrested from a very young age in order to, I think, create this sense of fear about resisting the occupation.
Right. Yeah. And Mr. Ran, coming back to you, your take on it, it is, of course, it's getting any kind of international community involvement in these issues have clearly not gone very far. The last peace talks that were attempted, US-sponsored peace talks, were back in 2014, and they also miserably failed. How do we resolve this issue? How many Palestinians will have to die before the world starts to take notice?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. Though I have to say I was not aware that this show is about sci-fi, because this is what I've been hearing so far. You forgot to mention that every month we have between 100 to 200 terror attacks committed by Arabs against Jews. Israeli defense forces will continue to arrest people who are committing acts of terror against Israelis. If Israel was as horrible as you've just tried to portray it, we would not have a conflict. The conflict would have been solved in a matter of hours. The Arab population of Gaza proper, Israel proper, and Judea and Samaria, which you refer to as West Bank, has grown tenfold. So I'm sorry, but this description of reality is not realistic.
Okay, so let's dispel the idea of, dispel your notion that this is a sci-fi program. Let's delve into your version of the reality. Why, you mentioned those hundreds and hundreds of attacks by Arabs on Israelis, defenseless poor Israelis sitting there on the other side, completely unarmed. Why are they attacking the Israelis?
Well, the Palestinian Authority is giving money to people who commit terror attacks against Israel. In fact, if you've committed a crime, if you murdered an Israeli and you sit in the Israeli prison, you will get 5 times more money than the average wage. If you've committed a terror attack and you've died in the process, the Palestinian Authority will name a town square or a soccer team after you. So when you have this incitement of terror, then obviously you're going to have terror. And in fact, Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen has said recently that if he would have one less penny, he would make sure that this penny will go to the usage of terror and not to build his state. So you're asking me, why is there so much terror? And you know, you mentioned fear. I've never seen a group of people who are apparently so afraid, but for some reason have no fear. The footage you can just see on the screen have no fear in confronting soldiers. And the reason why they have no fear is because they know that the IDF only uses force when it's necessary. I serve in the IDF. I serve every year between 1 and 2 months. And I can tell you that the alleged explosives, I've seen people throwing Molotov bottle at me. I had a soldier that was attacked by a knife with a Palestinian terrorist trying to stab him with a knife. I've seen it myself. So to argue that if Israel is the aggressor in this conflict, I think it's just, yes, it's closer to science fiction.
So, Ms. Norma, since we are sort of delving dangerously close to science fiction, let me get your take on your version of reality on this. Over 290, over 300 Palestinians have been killed since, I believe the last count was this much. I can't really tell because the number keeps changing. Every other day, new Palestinians are dead. So do you believe that this is something that the PA is funding so that, and people are conducting ruthlessly against Israelis so they could get a town named after them?
No, I think, why should you arrest children then in that case? Why are you arresting children who are like 8 years old? And in the case of, say, for instance, a boy who was 12 years old, his name was Muhammad Shadi Farah. He was arrested at a bus stop and he was 12 years old. Why do you put children in prison? What can they do? Furthermore, if you're talking about the Great Return March that has been on for the last year, over 200 people have been killed, including children. Someone I know whose neighbor was 11 years old was targeted. I don't see why. It's very obvious. The sniper knows who he's aiming for, and why are they killing children in this case?
Mr. Ran, what is the threat? What is the threat of a highly well-equipped sharpshooter with guns and other arms and equipment on his body, an IDF soldier? What is the threat that a child poses from 150 meters away of the fence when he's shot in the head?
But all of a sudden, they're not really worried about going near the fence. I think it is a horrible war crime to see that the Arabs of Gaza are hiding behind children and attacking innocent civilians in Israel, including women and children. Unfortunately for me, you can see these videos of people who are literally pushing their children forward. Now, my question is, what would you do if a child was holding an AK-47 aiming a gun at you? The problem that I have with this is that
there any proof? Is there any proof that this child was holding an AK-47 shooting at Israeli forces?
Footage.
We've never seen. We've never seen. We've never come across this footage. Okay, moving on. This is not just. This is one case in point that you're mentioning. What about the paramedics that are shot there? What about the journalists who were reporting on the ground? Short point blank range in the head, in the back, as they're retreating. What is the justification of that? What kind of guns? What kind of bombs are retrieved from their bodies?
You just gave me the easiest case, because in this case, it was already proven that that person specifically was active in terror attacks.
Ms. Norma, what is your finding? The justification of using children as human shields justifies them being shot dead by IDF soldiers?
Actually, I know personally children who have been killed. And like my friend's family, they were killed in Gaza because it was an airstrike on their building. Obviously, it was not children being held hostage by Hamas. It was a whole family of 11 people were killed instantly when a bomb dropped on them. Similarly, in the case of my friend whose neighbor, the boy 11 years old, he was just following his two sisters and his mother told him not to go. But he wanted to go with his sisters who were medics to the border, and he was many hundreds of meters away. He was just going to watch them treat the people who were injured. And yet he was somehow targeted and shot in the head, which just made no sense at all. And he was 11 years old.
Mr. Ran, what in your opinion, since you have a stronger grip on reality than us, what in your opinion is the ratio of IDF soldiers or Israelis killed on that side of the fence as a result of Hamas attacks versus Palestinians killed by indiscriminate fire by IDF?
Again, I don't agree with the fact of IDF not trying to do only what is necessary. Here's my list of friends that I've known that were murdered because of terror attacks. The difference between the two sides is that when the IDF kills someone and they're not supposed to kill them, we investigate it. And on the Palestinian Authority, they celebrate it and they try to encourage it. So when you're trying to portray, again, Israel as the aggressor on this side, I'm trying to understand. I'm not saying that Israel doesn't kill innocent people. At wartime, war is hell and innocent people die. The difference is how you take your moral stance on it.
You're saying it is justified because it is a war zone. Are you saying that because it's a war zone, it is justified that so many children and innocent civilians are to be shot dead because they are allegedly Hamas fighters hiding behind them?
I am saying that while Hamas and the PA glorify terror and they're happy with every death that they have, the Israeli government condemns it and tries to make sure that there are no dead people on either side. And if I was as horrible as you just tried to portray, we're just randomly shooting people, I would not have a conflict.
Let me pull in Ms. Norma here. She's an expert on this, on her own version of it. She's written books on the prisoners. Let's talk more on the solution front. What is the solution to this problem?
The solution is the Palestinians, maybe the young ones, they feel a total sense of loss in a way that they see no future. And all they know is about those children in Gaza. If you are 10 years old, you've seen 3 brutal attacks on Gaza already. This is what you grow up with. You're traumatized. Children in the West Bank, they have seen raids on their homes. Children have been arrested at 3 a.m. in the morning, and they're as young as 10, 11 years old. So soldiers have come in a house. I've seen the stories of these kids, and the soldiers are coming to look for a child at 3 a.m. in the morning, and they're waking up the whole family. The child is dragged from his bed. All these things have a very long-term effect.
Solution, Ms. Norma, what is the solution? What can we expect, or what should we work towards in trying to resolve this issue? What is your take on that?
Of course, you have to end this occupation. You have to end the sense of checkpoints, being subject to this different laws. How the children grow up, you have to give them more freedom. People in Gaza have to be allowed to leave. They have to be allowed to leave and go off and pursue their education, take part in sports, because Malaysia recently did not allow Israeli athletes to come to Malaysia. But that's because many Palestinian athletes have not been allowed to leave Gaza to take part in championships.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Norma, for your take. Coming back to you, Mr. What's your take on this? How do we resolve this issue? How do we move forward?
I actually agree. I think it's really important to stop the occupation in Gaza and get rid of Hamas, which is a terrorist organization which is based on theocracy. So yeah, free Gaza from Hamas. That'll be a good step for freedom of the people there.
Okay, Ms. Mary Saliba, she's joining us now from Istanbul. She's also she's a journalist working with TRT World. What's your take on this? We're talking about the solution of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Of course, here, one of our guests, Mr. Rand, believes that the blame solely rests on Hamas and the Arabs. If they would just stop attacking, they wouldn't be getting killed so much. What's your take on this?
Okay, with all due respect, I think we need to look at this conflict again as a highly irregular situation. We cannot possibly look at Israel like a normal, healthy, functioning state that actually looks after the rights of all civilians. There is tremendous prejudice against Palestinian people within the Israeli system. They are treated very differently from people who are classified as Israeli citizens. Many Palestinians, if not all, if I'm correct, in the West Bank have actually no Israeli citizenship. Therefore, they're not Israeli citizens, and therefore they are not counted in terms of being treated equally and alike as many other Israeli and Jewish citizens. We really have to see this situation for what it is. It's an open terror campaign against the Palestinian people. There are tremendous accounts of Israeli night raids on Palestinian families, on Palestinian homes. Last night was just one example. In January, the UN reported 11 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces in the last 2 months. Recently, a 16-year-old girl killed at a checkpoint, Palestinian girl killed at an Israeli checkpoint. 3,000 Palestinians have been killed since the March protests last year. These people are, let's look at the reality. They're people, they are families, they are mothers, they are fathers, and they are children. And they are not by all means just painting them all with this brush of terrorism. It's just a cop-out, basically.
And what is the solution, in your opinion, Ms. Mary? How do we go forward from here? How long before the international community can even have a say? I mean, all international organizations, the UN, the EU, the World Bank, all of them have come out and said, yes, this is a major humanitarian crisis there in Gaza. What is being done to the Palestinians is absolutely wrong. It's an open-air prison. But when does this translate into a conflict resolution?
I think that is certainly the big question. I'm sure that for most Israelis, I've spent a lot of time in Palestine myself. I've met a lot of Israeli people. They are enlightened people, they are educated, and many of them are actually empathetic to other people. I feel that they don't really understand what their own government is doing. I feel that they are quite subject to a lot of propaganda from Israeli authorities, IDF media. I think if they really understood the truth and came into more contact with Palestinian people, I think there would be a great chance for peace between people. I think many Israelis will be very empathetic and would not be proud that their government or their authority is treating other people in this way. So allowing the truth to come out for Israeli people, I think, is a very powerful source.
Let's see that happen, indeed. Thank you so much, Ms. Madiba, for joining us, and also Mr. Bar-Yoshafat for joining us and giving your version on this critical issue as it continues to go on. Something that I want to add on before we close the show is this is something a defense minister of Israel also said. Avigdor Lieberman went out and said about justifying the killings of the Palestinians, saying that there are no innocent people in Gaza. When that is the take of the political leadership in Israel, what to expect from the IDF, as hundreds and thousands of families have lost a loved one, have lost a child, have lost a breadwinner on the pretext that they are attacking us across the fence, what border? And these questions remain unanswered by the international community, who doesn't seem to have the time to put any pressure on them. And meanwhile, the raids will continue for alleged militants in the West Bank, in Gaza, and hundreds more will be killed with pellet guns, with indiscriminate fire. But what is going to be done remains to be seen. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have today in Newswire. We will catch you again tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.